When you change your identity, it's a very good idea to try and be in a new environment when you do that. Otherwise, people are going to try and drag you back into the old one. One of the things I hated about my youth was the fact that it was very regimented. My schedule was always controlled by other people. When my family was still fairly young, my father and mother became Mormons, which is a wonderful faith, but I always felt, I guess, a little uncomfortable in that in a way, because I'm a sort of a person who has a very strong value, I guess, for freedom and liberty, being able to be self-expressive, and I always felt a little repressed, I think. My idea of what being good was to conform and do these things that were supposed to bring you happiness and fulfillment, but they weren't. Well, my father began selling kind of a soil improvement product to farmers, and my wife became pregnant with our first child, and so I had to go to work. And I began selling this product to farmers in the area. And at that time, I was living a very nice lifestyle. I had a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-story house in a beautiful neighborhood there. In any event, about that time, I entered I guess, a kind of a midlife crisis. My father developed cancer at this time. And a lot of times I felt in a way I was kind of living his life. I'd become chasing this idea of success, the American dream. But once I realized that this was not who I was, this was an artificial identity that I had imagined and assumed for myself, but there are other much more positive identities that could be assumed, then I began to really think about the whole problem of identification and identity. I decided I was going to make a major change in my life. We were going to have to take a big downgrade, move to a smaller house, because I was going to take, even if it was a labor job, digging ditches or whatever it was, something that I felt I was producing real value about, that I felt ethical about, and that would give me some kind of a fresh start in life. And I was beginning to develop this idea of finding out who I really was without all of these other things. From that point on, I became kind of nomadic. I never lived in one place more than 1 or 2 years. And I ended up living on the street in Seattle for, I don't know, almost a year. I rode the freight trains from Seattle down to Sacramento, California. And I discovered during that time, I'd always been afraid of, what's going to happen if I don't have a job, if I don't have a house, if I don't have a certain amount of possessions. Everything I owned at that time I could carry in a duffel bag. And yet, there was a sense of freedom that I had. Actually, I was just as happy, or much happier than I'd been when I'd been living in this nice house in a nice neighborhood. I found that you didn't have to have a lot of things. What mattered to me was having time of my own to just do what I like to do, or to think, or to read, or to visit with other people. I changed my name, and I decided I would totally abandon the Social Security number. I wanted to be completely off the official grid. This was a good idea because by changing your name, it begins to blur your past. What you want to do when you become your real, authentic person is let go of a lot of these old things from the past. So each time I made a major change in my life, sometimes a new name would be fitting for that, you know. Well, I don't want to give the full name because I don't want to have them be able to track me through going back and coming back up to the present time. I will give you the 3 last names, Bailey, Lincoln, and Hatley, that I've used. Those last names with no Social Security number wouldn't allow me to be tracked. This is a process of discovery. It's not, you don't get the whole thing at once. It's a gradient scale, you know. Just like starting out with anything, you just don't go to here and then that's all settled, we're all finished, it's done. It's evolution. Once I moved here, that was a peak or a breakthrough this level. I'm very happy with the identity that I have right now. When I came out here to build my house, I didn't have to go begging some bureaucrat for permission to build it. I just came out, I just built what I wanted, you know. I didn't have any trouble with police, although finally there was I had a little crack in my aura here about 2 years ago, and a new deputy that was out here who was not familiar with me pulled me over. He put me in handcuffs and took me up to the jail there. And he was saying, "Mr. Bailey, I'm bringing charges against you under failure to identify." This man is a very large man, you know, he could be intimidating. He's a Texas deputy. When he stopped me there and he pulled me over, he started asking me questions, you know, where I live, where I was from. He wanted identification, of course, first of all, when I told him I didn't carry identification. And he said, "Well, what's your name?" And I says, "Well, I'm Hat. I'm known as Hat Bailey. Hat of the family Bailey." He said, "Well, I want your real name." I says, "Oh, well, my real name is known only to God. It's written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and it's not a word in the English language. My true identity, my real name." And he says, "No." He says, I want your, you know, and this is a good question. What is your real name? What is your real identity?" And of course, I'd already had like 2 or 3 different identities in the past. Which one do you want me to give you? But what I told him was, "Am I required to answer these questions?" And he says, "No. You know, according to American law, you have a right to remain silent." But of course, at that point is when he put me in handcuffs and took me up to jail. So you kind of get penalized for asserting your human rights sometimes. They kept me for a while in jail, but eventually they just let me go because they didn't have any basis upon which to truly charge me. When I first came out here, I was really pretty much of a hermit almost. You know, I lived all by myself mainly and saw very few people. I'm basically a little shy, but as I got to know people, I started working for people. I became closer to them. I made friends with this guy who was going to this little community church. I hadn't really contemplated a church life. You know, I'd gotten away from that. When I started going, then I found that it's not just about me, it's about my connection with other people spiritually, that there was opportunities to be of service and to grow as an individual through that service. And so as an opening appeared, I stepped into it, you know. Another opening appeared, I stepped into that one, and then I eventually became the pastor of this church. Specialization is for insects, as Robert Heinlein said. Human beings are more multifaceted than that, you know. And so when I'm out here now, the freedoms I have are so I can rearrange my schedule anytime I like, put my attention where I want to put it. I have absolutely no bills, you know, that have to be paid every month. I only have one bill, that's for my communications, you know, my telephone and my DSL. And that is, I don't pay, somebody else pays that for me in return for a certain amount of maintenance work that I do for them each month. And even that isn't really specified. Since I have divorced myself from the system, I do not receive the pension for which I would be eligible. I do not receive it, I do not ask for it, I do not apply for it. I don't apply for any government benefits. Some people think they're getting something by having a certain kind of a car, or a certain kind of a house, a certain kind of property, having certain kinds of clothing, having certain kinds of jewelry. But all those are, to me, are kind of illusory, you know? I've built many very close and dear friendships and relationships around me. And I think that's important. I've actually more appeared and become more real to the people that I have in my life now than I ever had to before, because I was being a false person. I was acting a role, and most of those people were acting roles too. So what do you have? Two roles interacting? That's not real people, that's not real life. All of my family now, I mean, I've forgiven all of them, and I'm in good terms with all of them pretty much, although I'm sure there's things that I do now that many of them would not approve of. But there are some of them that are less judgmental, and those I have pretty open communications with. I always thought maybe one of these days my brother Sam would come out, but so far that hasn't happened. I have gone back to visit a couple of places in the past, but I haven't had anybody come out here. But I'm pretty far off the beaten path, as you know. There's always a certain amount of trade-offs. There's a price to be paid, I should say, I guess, for every single thing that you get in this world, you know. So many of them, see, they think they have to do certain things in order to survive. They don't realize that they have much more power to live a life that's much closer to their real dreams than they had ever given themselves credit for. And there's prices to pay, there's inconveniences. You're going to have to go through a bit of chaos and turmoil in order to reestablish your new reality, you know. And most people are just, they let themselves become slaves of fear. People are frightened they'll give up their natural rights to privacy, natural rights just to be left alone. My only advice would be is to really, really, truly, and sincerely seek self-honesty and be willing to accept the lies about yourself, you know. And what I assure you is that on a very deep and real level, you are more wonderful and magnificent than you can possibly imagine.